The marketplace was alive with noise. Stalls of colorful fabrics, strange alien fruits, and shining weapons lined the streets. Traders from across the galaxy argued over prices, while guards in dark armor watched the crowd with glowing eyes. In the middle of this chaos, a human man stood quietly. Daniel Reeves' clothes were plain, his face shadowed by a hood. His hands stayed in his pockets, but his eyes moved constantly, studying everything and everyone. A loud crack of a whip split the air, and the noise of the marketplace slowly died. Everyone turned to look at the square. There, on a raised platform, stood an alien official, tall and broad with glistening green scales. Varkas, his gold-trimmed robe dragged across the stone as he stepped forward. In his clawed hands, he held a long black rod that hummed with power. At his feet, kneeling and bound, was a young human worker. His face was bruised, his hands bloody from hours of labor. Daniel's jaw tightened as he watched. Varkas raised his voice, loud and sharp. This human thief was caught stealing food from the council's storehouses. As a warning to all slaves, he shall pay with his life. The crowd cheered, some laughing cruelly. Humans in the crowd lowered their heads, too afraid to speak. Daniel felt the rage boil in his chest, but his face stayed calm. The young man on the platform cried out, "Please. I was hungry, my family." Varkas slammed the rod on the ground, and a blast of energy struck the human in the chest. The body collapsed, smoke rising from it. The alien crowd roared with approval. But Daniel didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on Varkas. He whispered to himself, "One life for one? No, one life for all." Then he turned and melted into the crowd, vanishing into the shadows. That night, deep underground, Daniel walked through a dark tunnel. At the end, a group of humans huddled around a dim fire. They looked up nervously as he entered. "It's him," someone whispered. An older man stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come back, Daniel. You're a marked man now." Daniel lowered his hood. "They murdered a boy today. Burned him alive," the old man sighed. "That's what they do, and if you speak too loud, you'll end up next to him." Daniel stared at the fire for a long moment, then said, "We can't stay quiet anymore." A woman shook her head. "Fight them? With what? Sticks? Rocks? They have fleets, weapons, armies." Daniel's lips curled into a faint smile. "They bleed too. They die too. And they never expect humans to bite back." The room fell silent. "I've been preparing," he continued. "There are others. On other planets, waiting. We don't have to fight their whole army. Not at first. We just have to remind them what humans are capable of." A few people exchanged nervous glances. Finally, the woman spoke again, softly this time. "What do you need us to do?" Daniel's smile grew just a little wider. 2 nights later, the alien port was unusually quiet. A large cargo ship stood on the landing pad, full of supplies meant for the council's fleet. Guards patrolled lazily, laughing and kicking at chained human workers. Daniel crouched on a rooftop, his hood drawn up, a small black device in his hand. Behind him, 2 other humans waited nervously. One whispered, "Is this really going to work?" Daniel didn't look back. "It'll work." He pressed a button on the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low rumble shook the ground. The ship's engines roared to life, then exploded in a massive ball of fire. The blast sent guards and workers flying. The night sky lit up orange and red. Alarms wailed, and aliens shouted in confusion. From the shadows, Daniel walked calmly away. Blending into the panic dot in the days that followed, more attacks came. Power lines were cut. Supply ships vanished. Weapons depots burned. On walls and screens across the city, someone painted a symbol, a human hand gripping a broken chain, and 3 words. "We remember." Varkas was furious. He slammed his claws on his desk as guards reported failure after failure. "Find them," he bellowed. "Find this human rebel and crush him. Daniel became a ghost. No one saw him for days at a time, yet his presence was everywhere. Every attack made more humans brave enough to join him, but the aliens began to fight back. They planted spies among the humans. One night, as Daniel and his group met in an abandoned warehouse, a squad of alien soldiers stormed in. Ambush. Someone yelled. Energy blasts lit up the room. Two of Daniel's closest allies fell, their screams echoing in the darkness. Daniel barely escaped through a hidden tunnel, blood trickling down his arm from a wound. Outside, under the cold stars, he looked back at the smoke rising from the warehouse. He whispered, "For every one of ours you take, I'll take 10 of yours." Weeks passed, the rebellion spread. Not just on one planet, but across many. Humans everywhere began to rise. Farmers sabotaged alien food supplies. Engineers crashed alien ships from inside. Even other enslaved species started to join the humans. Then came the message. One quiet morning, every screen, every speaker in the capital city came to life at once. Daniel's voice filled the air. "You paid for one human's blood. Now you will pay in rivers. We are coming." The symbol of the broken chain flashed across the screens. Varkas ordered all troops to defend the capital. At night, the human forces entered the city. They came through tunnels, sewers, hidden doors. Thousands of them, armed with stolen weapons and burning rage. The alien soldiers fought hard. Streets turned into battlefields. Fire lit up the sky, and the sound of fighting filled every corner of the city. In the chaos, Daniel moved toward the alien council chamber. 2 guards blocked his way, but he took them down swiftly, one with a knife, the other with a stolen blaster. Inside the chamber, he finally faced Varkas. The alien was waiting, holding the same black rod he had used to kill the boy weeks earlier. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his hood falling back. Varkas sneered. "You think you've won? You're just a slave playing soldier." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And you're just a coward hiding behind your power." With a roar, Varkas lunged, swinging the rod. It crackled with energy as it passed inches from Daniel's face. They fought brutally, fists, claws, and weapons clashing. Daniel was faster, but Varkas was stronger. He caught Daniel's arm and slammed him to the floor, the rod pressing into his chest. Daniel gritted his teeth and managed to grab a shard of glass from the ground. With a sudden motion, he stabbed it into Varkas's neck. The alien stumbled back, gurgling, dropping the rod. Daniel stood over him, breathing heavily. He looked down at the dying alien and said coldly, "You thought one human life was cheap. Today you learned its true cost." Then he turned away, leaving Varkas gasping on the floor. Outside, the human flag, a hand crushing the alien crest, rose over the council building. The streets were filled with cheering humans and other freed slaves. Fires still burned, but the city was theirs now. Daniel stood on a balcony, watching. The alien fleet in the sky retreat, ships vanishing into the stars. Beside him, the woman from the underground meeting stepped forward. "We did it," she whispered. Daniel didn't smile. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "This is just the beginning," he murmured. Above them, the first rays of dawn broke. Through the smoke, lighting the ruins of the alien capital, and the new world waiting to be built. The underground tunnels stretched for miles beneath the city. Damp walls dripped with water, and the air smelled of stone and smoke. Daniel Reeve walked through the narrow passage, his boots echoing faintly. Behind him, a line of silent humans followed, their faces hidden under hoods. He stopped at a heavy steel door and knocked 3 times. A slot opened, and a pair of suspicious eyes stared out. "Who is it?" a voice demanded. "Daniel," he answered calmly. "Let me in." The slot slammed shut. A moment later, the door creaked open, and they all slipped inside. The room beyond was wide and low-ceilinged, lit by faint yellow lamps. Dozens of humans huddled there, men, women, even a few children, sitting on crates or leaning against walls. Their faces were tired, their clothes dirty. But when they saw Daniel, quiet murmurs spread that an older man stood to greet him. His back was straight despite his age, and his gray eyes watched Daniel carefully. "You've been busy," the man said. "The whole city talks about the explosions. The aliens have doubled their patrols. It's dangerous for you here." Daniel pulled off his hood and shook the dust from his shoulders. "Good," he replied. "Let them be afraid." "That's the first step," the older man frowned. "You can't scare them forever, boy. You hit them, they hit back harder. That's how it always ends. I don't want to see more of our people slaughtered." Daniel glanced around the room. Everyone was watching now, silent, waiting. "And how many of us have already been slaughtered?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "How many beaten, burned, or chained until they couldn't even cry? And what did you do? Nothing. You hid here and prayed it would stop." A young woman in the corner stood up suddenly. "He's right," she said loudly. "They killed my brother last winter for dropping a tool. No trial, no mercy. Just dead." Another man added, "They took my wife to the labor camps. I've never seen her again." The room stirred, voices growing louder as pain turned to anger. Daniel held up a hand. "Enough. I don't need speeches. I need fighters. Who among you is ready to stand up?" One by one, hands rose in the air. Later that night, Daniel sat on an overturned crate, rolling a small metal sphere between his fingers. Across from him, the young woman from earlier approached cautiously. "You never said your name," she said. He looked up at her. "Daniel, I'm Mara," she replied. She sat down across from him and studied him for a moment. "Do you really believe we can beat them?" Daniel gave a small smile. "We already have. Every ship we destroy, every soldier we take down, it's proof we bleed them slowly. And when the time comes, we hit them so hard they never recover." Mara shook her head. "But how? We're just humans?" He finished for her. "Yes, and that's what makes us dangerous. They think we're broken. That's their mistake." Over the next weeks, Daniel's plan took shape. At dawn, he and Mara led a small team out of the tunnels. They moved through the alleys and back streets. Like shadows, avoiding patrols and cameras, they targeted power stations first, cutting off light and heat to alien quarters. They disabled water pumps and blocked roads. At night, they spray-painted their symbol, the hand and chain, across walls and statues. Soon, the aliens couldn't walk the streets without fear. One evening, after sabotaging a weapons depot, Mara laughed breathlessly as they escaped into the dark. "Did you see their faces?" she said between gasps. "They don't know what to do anymore." Daniel grinned faintly. "That's good. Confusion works in our favor. But don't underestimate them. They'll come back hard." Daniel was right. A week later, as they returned to the tunnels, they found the door smashed open and the room inside in ruins. Fires still burned in corners, and bodies lay scattered on the ground. Mara gasped and ran to an older woman lying motionless. "They found us," someone whispered. Daniel stood in the middle of the room, fists clenched. His eyes moved over the destruction, the broken crates, the bloodstains, the silence. From behind him, a voice said, "It was a trap. They sent spies. We trusted them, and they sold us out." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we done. Trust anyone who hasn't bled with us. From now on, we're ghosts. No names, no homes, no ties." He knelt next to the body of the older man who had first let him in. Quietly he muttered, "For every one of ours you take, I'll take 10 of yours." The next day, Daniel and Mara climbed to the roof of a crumbling building at dawn. Below, the city spread out, quiet, tense, afraid. Mara glanced at him. "What now?" He didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small transmitter. She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He stared at the rising sun. "Hope," he replied. Then he pressed the button. All over the city, on walls, screens, and speakers, the same message appeared. We remember. We rise. Join us. At first, nothing happened. But then, slowly, humans started stepping out of buildings and alleys, carrying tools, scraps of metal, and stolen weapons. On the rooftops, others raised flags bearing the rebellion symbol. Daniel's voice filled the air as the message repeated. They think we're weak, but we are many. We are angry. We are ready. The crowd began to chant. Quietly at first, then louder. We remember. We rise. The sound grew into a roar that filled the streets. That night, the alien governor called an emergency meeting in the council chamber. Varkas slammed his claw on the table. This ends now. He snarled. Send every soldier. Burn their tunnels, their homes, everything. A nervous advisor spoke up. But, sir, the rebellion is spreading. It's not just here anymore. Other planets report attacks too. Varkas glared at him. Then we crush them all. If they want war, we'll give them war. But war was exactly what Daniel wanted. 2 days later, a train carrying alien weapons derailed and exploded. In another city, a fuel depot went up in flames. Everywhere the aliens turned, humans struck from the shadows. Mara sat with Daniel one evening on a rooftop, watching the chaos below. They're scared, she said. Daniel nodded. Good, but scared animals are dangerous. We need to be smarter. Mara hesitated before asking, how did you become this? What made you fight? For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he spoke softly. They took everything from me. My parents, my brother, my home. At first, I was just like everyone else, afraid. But then I realized something. Fear is a cage. You can live your whole life inside it. Or you can break it. He glanced at her. What about you? She shrugged. I was tired of crying, so I decided to stop. Daniel gave a faint smile. Good enough. One rainy night, as they planned their next strike, a young boy ran into the tunnel. Soaked and breathless. They're coming, he panted. Hundreds of them, straight for us. Daniel stood immediately. Move everyone, now. People scrambled to grab supplies and weapons. Mara grabbed his arm. There's no time. We'll never outrun them. Daniel looked around quickly, then pointed to a narrow service tunnel. We make our stand here. They barricaded the entrance with crates and metal sheets. As the sound of boots and claws drew closer, Daniel and his small group crouched behind. The barricade, ready? He asked quietly. Mara tightened her grip on her weapon. Always. The first wave of soldiers crashed against their defense, firing wildly. The humans fired back, their stolen rifles blazing. The confined tunnel amplified the noise into a deafening roar. For what felt like hours, they held their ground. For every soldier that fell, 2 more seemed to take his place. But the humans didn't break. When the aliens finally retreated, leaving behind a pile of their dead, the humans cheered weakly. Exhausted but alive, Daniel stood in the middle of the tunnel, breathing hard, his face streaked with blood and sweat. One man clapped him on the shoulder. We did it. We stopped them. Daniel shook his head. No, this was just one battle. The real war is still ahead. At dawn, as they emerged from the tunnel, the city was eerily quiet. Smoke still hung in the air, but the streets were full of humans, watching, waiting. Daniel climbed onto a broken wall, raised his fist, and shouted, We remember! We rise! The crowd roared back. We remember! We rise! Mara came to stand beside him, her eyes shining with determination. They can't stop us now, she said. Daniel looked at the horizon, where the sun broke through the clouds, casting light over the battered city. They'll try, he replied. But we've already won, because now they're afraid of us. He raised the flag high as the wind caught it, and the symbol of rebellion fluttered above the ruins. And for the first time in years, the humans below began to believe that freedom was more than just a dream. The city lay under a thick blanket of night, silent except for the distant hum of alien patrols. Shadows stretched across the cracked streets, and flickering lights from broken lamps painted the buildings in uneven darkness. Daniel Reeves stood on a rooftop, his breath visible in the cold air. Beside him, Mara checked her weapons quietly. Around them, the small group of rebels moved like ghosts. "We don't have much time," Daniel whispered, his eyes scanning the patrol routes below. "Once we hit the cargo ship, the alarms will sound. We need to be gone before reinforcements arrive." Mara nodded, her hand steady on the grip of her rifle. "This is it. No turning back." Daniel's gaze dropped to the large ship docked in the harbor. It was heavily guarded. Armored walls, energy shields, and armed soldiers patrolling the area. The ship carried weapons and supplies for the alien fleet. Destroying it would be a bold strike, a message that the rebellion was real. "Are the explosives ready?" Daniel asked. One of the rebels, a wiry man named Jace, held up a small black device, no bigger than a fist. "Timer set for 5 minutes after we place it. Enough time to get clear." Daniel's heart pounded. "Good. Move fast." They slipped. From rooftop to rooftop, their movements swift and silent. As they approached the cargo ship, the guards seemed unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Daniel crouched behind a crate and peered over. 2 guards stood by the entrance, chatting lazily. "We need to distract them," Mara whispered. Daniel glanced at Jace. "You take the left side. Create noise. We'll plant the explosives on the right." Jace gave a small grin. "Got it." In a flash, Jace threw a small rock, hitting a metal pipe. It clanged loudly. The guards immediately turned toward the noise, their blasters raised. "That's our chance," Daniel said. He and Mara darted to the right side of the ship, carefully placing the explosives at critical points along the hull and engine compartments. The timer ticked down silently. "Done," Daniel said, stepping back. Suddenly, a sharp voice barked from behind them. "Stop right there!" Daniel spun around. A young alien soldier, too close for comfort, aimed his blaster directly at them. Mara raised her rifle and fired a warning shot. The soldier ducked behind a crate, shouting for backup. "Time to run!" Daniel shouted. Explosions ripped through the harbor seconds later, lighting up the night sky with a fierce orange glow. The cargo ship erupted in flames, sending a shockwave that shattered windows and knocked guards off their feet. Alarms blared everywhere. Daniel, Mara, and their team sprinted through the maze of streets and alleys, dodging blaster fire and patrols rushing toward the burning ship. Behind them, the harbor burned like a second sun. "Split up here," Daniel commanded. "Meet back at the tunnels." As they ran, Daniel felt a sharp pain in his leg. He stumbled but caught himself. "Mara, keep going," he shouted. She looked back, worry in her eyes. "I'm not leaving you." Daniel forced a grin. "I'll be fine, go." But before they could move further, a squad of alien soldiers appeared at the alley's end, blocking their escape. "Trapped," Mara whispered. Daniel's mind raced. They were outnumbered and low on ammo. Then a sudden sound, a piercing whistle, cut through the chaos. From the rooftops, hidden figures dropped down behind the soldiers, catching them off guard. It was reinforcements. More rebels. "We knew you'd need help," Jace said, grinning as he fought alongside them. The tide turned quickly. The rebels fought fiercely, using everything they had: stolen weapons, makeshift explosives, even broken pipes. The soldiers retreated, leaving behind their fallen comrades. Daniel pulled Mara up. "Let's move. The worst is yet to come." In the safety of the tunnels, the rebels caught their breath. Daniel examined his bleeding leg, a deep cut from a stray blast. "Not bad for a first strike," Mara said, her eyes shining with excitement. Daniel smiled despite the pain. "It's more than that. It's proof they can be hurt." Jace looked around at the group. The city's buzzing. People are talking. Some are scared, but many are hopeful. A young woman spoke up nervously. But what if they come back stronger? What if this just brings more pain? Daniel's face grew serious. Then we fight harder. This is just the start. The first spark. The fire will grow. Days later, the alien council gathered in anger. Varkas slammed his claw on the table. This rebellion is a threat to our rule. We cannot allow it to spread. A younger advisor said cautiously, "They are small now, but their strikes are clever. They know our weaknesses." Varkas snarled. "Then find those weaknesses and crush them. No mercy." Back with the rebels, Daniel and Mara planned their next moves. They knew the aliens would retaliate fiercely. But every new attack brought more humans into the fight. "We have to stay one step ahead," Daniel said. "Use their fear against them," Mara nodded. "They don't expect us to be smart. They think we're weak." Daniel looked at the horizon, the city lights flickering like distant stars. "They will learn, soon." The nights that followed were tense. The rebels struck supply lines, sabotaged communication towers, and spread their symbol across the city walls, a hand breaking free from chains. The alien soldiers became paranoid, setting traps and increasing patrols. But Daniel's group was always just out of reach. One evening, Daniel returned to the tunnels alone. Mara was waiting, her face pale. "They found us," she said quietly. "A spy in our midst. We lost 2 fighters." Daniel's jaw clenched. "They will pay." He sat down heavily. "We cannot afford mistakes. We need trust. And we need more allies." Weeks passed, and the rebellion grew. Daniel received messages from other planets, whispers of humans and other slaves rising up. One night, he stood before a small crowd of new recruits, their faces full of hope and fear. "You are the beginning," he told them. "The first strike was just a spark. Together, we will become the flame that lights the galaxy." As dawn broke, Daniel looked out over the city from a rooftop. His legs still hurt, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The war had begun. And humanity's fight for freedom had only just started. The city was no longer safe. Alien patrols had doubled and hunted every shadow. The rebellion had stirred fear in the rulers, and now they were desperate to end it. Daniel moved cautiously through the empty streets, his face shadowed beneath his hood. His legs still throbbed from the last fight, but his eyes burned with determination. Behind him, Mara and a handful of rebels followed silently. "We're close to the safe house," Mara whispered. Daniel nodded but didn't slow. Every step felt heavier, like the city itself was closing in on them. Suddenly, a sharp noise cracked in the night, the snap of a twig. Daniel froze. "Stop!" The group pressed against a wall, holding their breath. From the darkness, figures emerged, alien soldiers, their weapons glowing softly. "It's a trap," Mara hissed. The soldiers raised their blasters and fired. Chaos exploded as the rebels scattered. Daniel rolled behind a crate, returning fire with his stolen rifle. His heart pounded as bullets zipped past him. "Fall back," he shouted. But as they tried to regroup, another sound came, a shrill alarm from the distant command tower. "They've locked down the city," Mara said grimly. Daniel knew the hunt had begun in full force. Hours later, Daniel crouched in an abandoned building with Mara and 2 others. Their faces were grim, their breaths shallow. "We can't keep running like this," Daniel said, voice low. "They're using spies. They know our moves before we make them." One of the rebels, a quiet man named Lorne, spoke up. "I saw one of our own talking to an alien scout last week." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "A traitor," Mara clenched her fists. "We have to find out who it is, before more of us die." Daniel nodded. "Agreed, but we have to be smart. We can't trust anyone blindly." Days passed in tension and fear. Every meeting was held in secret. Every face was watched closely. The rebels moved like ghosts, never in the same place twice. One night, Daniel sat with Mara in the dark. "How do you stay strong?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked at the broken city around them. "Because if I don't, we all lose. Fear can kill faster than bullets." Mara smiled sadly. "I'm scared." "You should be," Daniel said honestly. "But that fear makes us fight." Then came the betrayal. During a meeting in a hidden cellar, a sudden blast shook the walls. Alien soldiers poured in through the entrances. "Trap!" Someone yelled. Shots rang out. Rebels scrambled to fight or flee. Daniel grabbed Mara's arm. "This way." They ran through twisting tunnels, but the aliens were close behind. A narrow passage blocked their path. Daniel looked around desperately. "There." Mara pointed to a rusted grate. They slipped through just as soldiers stormed the room behind them. Outside, rain began to fall, mixing with the smoke and dust. Daniel stopped, gasping for breath. "We're not safe anywhere." That night, Daniel called a meeting with the remaining rebels. "We have a spy," he said bluntly. "Someone is giving them our plans." Mara shook her head. "Who could do this? We all want the same thing." Daniel met her eyes. "Fear makes people do strange things." He paced the room. "We'll test everyone. No one moves without orders. No one talks without others." A murmur ran through the group. Suspicion and fear grew like a poison. Days turned into weeks. Trust broke apart. Friend turned against friend. One cold morning, Lorne disappeared. His empty bed was found, but no one knew where he had gone. Daniel feared the worst. Then a message arrived, simple but clear. "You cannot hide. The hunt has only just begun." Daniel stared at the message, clenched fists shaking. "They want to break us," Mara said softly. Daniel's eyes were hard. "Then we'll show them what it means to fight." In the following days, Daniel changed their tactics. Instead of fighting in the streets, they struck in secret, small sabotage missions, quick attacks, then vanished. Mara led a team that destroyed a supply depot, using stolen alien explosives. "We're hitting them where it hurts," she said proudly. But Daniel knew the hunt was far from over. One night, as they rested in a new hideout, footsteps echoed outside. Daniel motioned for silence. The door burst open. Soldiers flooded the room. Rebels fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered. Daniel fought his way to Mara's side. "We can't hold them," she shouted. "Escape." Daniel ordered. They broke through a side door, racing into the darkness. Outside, rain washed away the blood and dust. Daniel and Mara ran through twisting alleys, hearts pounding. "We're not safe," Mara gasped. Daniel nodded. "But we're not beaten." Ahead they saw a faint glow, a small ship waiting. "Go." Daniel pushed her forward. As Mara ran toward the ship, Daniel looked back. Soldiers closed in, their blasters lighting the night. Daniel raised his rifle, ready to make his last stand. A sudden roar split the sky, a low, powerful sound of engines. From above, rebel ships swooped down, firing on the soldiers. Daniel smiled grimly. Just in time. The soldiers scattered, retreating under the cover of the ships. Daniel ran to the ship, climbing aboard just before the hatch closed. Inside, the small rebel ship lifted off into the dark sky. Mara looked at Daniel, breathless but alive. "What now?" she asked. Daniel's eyes burned with fire. "Now we find the real enemy." The rebel ship cut through the black sky like a blade, its engines humming softly. Inside, Daniel sat at the front, staring out at the endless stars. His hands rested on his knees, but his mind was far from calm. Behind him, Mara adjusted the ship's controls while a few weary fighters patched up their wounds. "We got lucky back there," Mara said quietly. Daniel didn't turn his head. "Luck has nothing to do with it." She looked at him for a moment before saying, "You can't keep carrying this alone." Daniel finally met her gaze. "And who else will? Every day they hunt us harder. Every day they take more from us. I don't have the luxury of letting go." Mara opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. Instead, she checked the navigation screen. "We're almost there." Below them stretched a barren moon, gray and cratered. Hidden in one of its valleys was a secret base, a place where humans and other species gathered to plan what came next. The rebellion was no longer just whispers. It was growing, spreading, catching fire across the stars. The ship landed with a hiss of steam. As Daniel and Mara stepped out, dozens of figures emerged to greet them, humans, but also others. Small, sharp-eyed creatures with long tails, towering beings with tusks and thick armor. They all bowed slightly to Daniel. One of the tusked warriors stepped forward. "You struck the cargo ship and escaped the hunt," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "You've earned respect." Daniel simply nodded. "Respect won't win. This war, actions will." Mara smirked faintly at his answer, though her eyes still showed worry. Inside the base, maps and screens covered the walls, glowing with red and green lights. Rebel leaders crowded around a central table, arguing over their next move. "They've tightened security on every planet." One said, "We've lost 2 teams trying to breach their supply lines." Another added that. Daniel raised a hand, and silence fell. He stepped to the table and spoke clearly. "We can't just attack where they expect us. We need to hit them where it hurts. Not just soldiers, but their pride, their power." A smaller alien with bright yellow eyes looked up at him. "You mean the communications hub?" Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Take out their hub, and we cut their control over all nearby sectors. No orders. No reinforcements, chaos." The room erupted with nervous whispers. "That's suicide," someone muttered. Daniel's voice cut through the noise. "It's risk, not suicide. And it's time we stop waiting for the perfect moment. This is the moment." After a long pause, the tusked warrior stepped forward. "We're with you." One by one, the others nodded. Mara placed her hand on the table beside his. "Then it's decided," she said. Preparations began at once. Fighters loaded weapons, checked engines, and memorized maps. The target was clear, a massive tower on a city-covered planet. The tower wasn't just a symbol of power. It was the center of the aliens' communications network, connecting fleets and outposts across the galaxy. That night, as they sat alone in the dark hangar, Mara watched Daniel silently. Finally, she asked, "Do you ever wonder what happens after?" "After what?" he replied. "All this, the fighting, the running. What if we win? What then?" Daniel leaned back against the wall, his eyes distant. "If we win," he said slowly, "then maybe we can start living instead of just surviving." Mara didn't press further. She just nodded and whispered, "Then let's make sure we win." The next evening, the strike team launched. Dozens of ships flew through the dark, their lights dimmed to avoid detection. As they approached the planet, Daniel spoke into the comms. "We're not just attacking a tower. We're sending a message. We are not afraid. We are not finished." A quiet cheer rose from the rebels. The city below was alive with lights and movement. Patrol ships crisscrossed the skies, and the streets were full of soldiers. The tower loomed in the center, tall enough to pierce the clouds, its surface shimmering. With energy shields, Daniel's ship slipped into a hidden landing zone on the outskirts. The team moved out quickly, blending into the shadows of alleys and tunnels. "Stick to the plan," Daniel whispered. "No mistakes." They split into squads, each with a part to play, cutting power, disabling shields, planting explosives. Mara stayed close to Daniel. As they moved through a narrow street, she whispered, "Feels too quiet." Daniel glanced at her but didn't stop. "That's because they don't know yet, but they will." When they reached the base of the tower, the first squad signaled that the power grid was down. Lights flickered across the city, and confusion spread among the soldiers. "Go," Daniel ordered. The team surged forward, climbing stairs, cutting through guards, planting charges at key points. Suddenly, blaster fire erupted from above. A squad of alien soldiers descended the stairwell, catching them in the open. "Ambush!" someone yelled. Mara fired back, her face grim. Daniel ducked behind a pillar, pulling a wounded fighter to safety. "Keep moving!" he shouted. "Don't stop!" The team fought their way upward, floor by floor, every step harder than the last. Smoke filled the stairwell, and bodies littered the ground. At the top, they reached the control room, a vast chamber full of blinking panels and glowing screens. Daniel planted the final charge beside the main console. 2 minutes, he said. But then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall, armored, and familiar. "Vark is." The alien's eyes glowed cold. "You've been a thorn long enough," he growled. Daniel raised his weapon, but Varkas lunged first, knocking it aside. The two crashed into each other, fists and claws flying. Mara fired at the soldiers trying to enter the room, her back to Daniel. On the floor, Daniel and Varkas struggled. The alien pinned him down, his claws inches from Daniel's throat. "You think you can win?" Varkas hissed. "You're nothing. Just a scared little human." Daniel gritted his teeth. Not scared anymore. With a sudden twist, he grabbed a piece of broken metal from the floor and drove it into Varkas's side. The alien roared in pain and stumbled back. Mara helped Daniel up. "Time's almost up." Daniel grabbed her hand, and they ran for the exit. Behind them, the charges beeped faster and faster. They barely made it to the stairwell when the room exploded. Fire and debris raining down around them. The tower shook violently, its lights dying one by one. From the street below, the rebels and even the civilians watched as the great structure crumbled, crashing to the ground in a storm of dust and flames. A deafening silence followed, then cheers rose like thunder. Back at the base, the rebels gathered around Daniel and Mara, their faces full of hope. "You did it," someone said. "You really did it." Daniel shook his head. "We did it. All of us." Mara smiled faintly. "You lit the fire. Now it's spreading." Indeed, messages were already coming in from other planets. Reports of uprisings, of alien garrisons, overrun, of humans and other species fighting back. The sparks had turned into a blaze. Later that night, as he stood outside the base, Daniel stared up at the stars. Mara joined him quietly. "They're afraid now," she said softly. Daniel didn't look at her, his eyes still on the dark sky. "Good," he murmured. "They should be." For the first time in years, he allowed himself a small smile. The fire had only just begun. The rebel fleet hung above the blackness of space like silent predators. Dozens of ships drifted together, their engines glowing faintly, waiting for the signal. Below them, the alien capital burned with lights. It was massive, a city that stretched from one horizon to the other, full of tall spires, armored fortresses, and endless streets crawling with soldiers. Daniel stood at the viewport of the lead ship, his hands clasped behind his back. His face was hard, his jaw tight. Mara came to stand beside him, her helmet under her arm. "This is it," she said softly. Daniel didn't move his eyes from the planet. "Everything we've done leads here. If we take the capital, the others will fall." Mara gave a faint smile. "You make it sound so simple." He turned to her at last. "It's not simple. It's necessary." Behind them, the crew worked quickly, loading weapons, checking shields, giving final orders. The air was thick with tension and quiet determination. Over the intercom, a voice announced, "All squadrons in position, awaiting your command." Daniel stared at the planet a moment longer before speaking. "We begin." The rebel fleet roared to life. Engines flared, and ships dived toward the capital through the thick clouds. Alien defenses woke at once, cannons fired from the surface, streaks of energy tearing through the sky. Daniel's ship shook violently as it passed through the first barrage. "Shields holding," someone called from the controls. Mara tightened her grip on her rifle. "This is worse than I imagined." Daniel didn't flinch. "We break their walls, and the city is ours. Nothing else matters." The ship split into squads, hitting key targets across the city: power stations, shield generators, and weapons towers. Explosions blossomed below, bright and terrible. Daniel's team landed near the center of the city, right outside the alien command fortress. The building was huge, black and silver, with banners of the enemy flapping in the smoky air. Rebels poured out of the ship, guns blazing. Daniel led them forward through blaster fire and chaos. Every step a battle. Inside the fortress, the corridors were wide and cold, lit by harsh white lights. The walls vibrated with the sound of distant gunfire and alarms. Mara ducked behind a pine pillar, firing at a squad of alien soldiers blocking the hallway. "They're dug in tight," she shouted. Daniel knelt beside her, checking his ammo. "We expected this. Push through." More rebels joined them, slowly forcing the aliens back. Step by step, they advanced, leaving behind scorch marks and bodies. Finally, they reached a massive door at the end of the hall, the command chamber. Daniel placed a hand on it, feeling the heat through the metal. "This is it," he murmured. Mara raised her rifle. "Ready when you are." With a deep breath, Daniel kicked the door open. The room was high-ceilinged, filled with screens and maps showing the battles across the galaxy. At the far end stood Varkas, the alien commander, his tall figure casting a long shadow. His claws tapped the floor slowly, and his eyes gleamed with hatred. "You've come far," Varkas sneered, "but this is where it ends." Daniel stepped inside, his voice calm. "You're right. It does end. For you." Varkas laughed, low and bitter. "You think this city means anything? Even if you burn it to the ground, we will rebuild." "We always rebuild." Daniel's face hardened. "Not this time." With a sudden roar, Varkas lunged. The two collided in the center of the room, fists and claws flashing. Mara and the others fired at the soldiers rushing in from the sides, holding the line. Daniel and Varkas crashed into a control console, sparks flying around them. The alien's claws ripped Daniel's shoulder, but Daniel didn't stop. He swung a hard punch into Varkas's jaw, sending him staggering back. "You can't win," Varkas growled. Daniel's voice was quiet but full of fire. "Watch me." Outside, the battle raged on. Rebel fighters swarmed the streets while ships fought overhead. Every corner of the city burned, and still the humans pressed forward. Mara glanced at Daniel as she reloaded. "We're running out of time." Daniel nodded grimly, dodging another strike from Varkas. "End it now." With a sudden surge of strength, he slammed Varkas against the wall and pulled a blade from his belt. "This is for everyone you killed," Daniel said coldly. The blade sank deep, and Varkas fell with a roar of pain and rage. His body slid to the floor, lifeless. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then a voice crackled over the rebel comms. "The fortress is ours. Repeat, the fortress is ours." Cheers rose from every corner of the city. Hours later, the capital lay in ruins, but it was theirs. Rebel flags flew from the tallest towers. Alien soldiers either fled or surrendered. In the main square, Daniel stood before the people, humans, allies, fighters, all gathered in the smoky dawnlight. Mara stood beside him, her armor scorched and battered, but her eyes bright. Daniel raised his voice so all could hear. "The city was a symbol of their power. Now it's a symbol of ours. Today we prove that we are not slaves. We are not broken. We are free." The crowd erupted in a deafening roar. From the rooftops, more rebel ships arrived, carrying supplies and reinforcements. Messages came in from distant planets, news of more victories, more uprisings. Mara leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "We did it." Daniel's eyes stayed on the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight touched the ruined towers. "No," he said quietly. This is just the beginning. Later, as the city settled into uneasy quiet, Daniel walked alone through the streets. Fires still burned, smoke curled into the air. But here and there, people emerged from hiding, faces wary but hopeful. A little boy ran up to him, carrying a scrap of cloth with the rebellion symbol painted on it. He looked up at Daniel with wide eyes. "Did we win?" The boy asked. Daniel crouched down and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We won today," he said gently. "And tomorrow we keep fighting." The boy smiled and ran back to his family. Daniel watched them disappear into the crowd, then straightened and turned back toward the fortress. Mara was waiting at the steps, arms crossed, watching him carefully. "You're thinking too much again," she teased. He gave her a small smile. "That's what leaders do." "Leaders also rest sometimes," she replied. "Maybe later," Daniel said. His gaze swept over the city one last time. Right now, there's still work to do. And with that, he walked back into the heart of the fortress, the new command center of a rebellion that was no longer just sparks. It had become a roaring fire, and nothing in the galaxy would put it out now. The air in the capital was heavy, thick with the smell of smoke and metal. The rebellion had taken the city, but the fight was far from over. The alien empire's fleets still circled above, waiting for orders. The streets were lined with rubble and broken banners, but they also held something new, hope. Daniel stood at the balcony of the captured fortress, looking over the city as the sun rose. His armor was scratched and dark with dust, his eyes sharp and tired. Below, people moved through the streets, carrying supplies, helping the wounded, pulling down the enemy's flags and raising their own. Mara approached quietly, her boots crunching on the stone floor. "You should sleep," she said. Daniel didn't look at her. "No time, their leader, he's still out there." Her expression hardened. "You really believe he's here?" Daniel nodded. "I can feel it." "He wouldn't run. He's too proud. He'll wait until the last possible moment and strike." Mara leaned on the railing, watching the city with him. "Then we find him before he finds us." Later that day, a rebel scout rushed into the command room. "We found him," he gasped. Daniel turned sharply. "Where?" The scout pointed to a map of the city, his finger landing on an old palace at the edge of the capital, a place untouched by the fighting. "He's hiding there, surrounded by his elite guards." The room went silent. Everyone stared at the map. Mara broke the silence. "It's a trap. He wants you to come." Daniel smiled faintly. "Good, let him wait. It ends today." They moved at dusk, slipping through back alleys and quiet streets. Daniel led a team of 12, the best fighters they had left. Mara stayed close to his side, her rifle ready. The palace rose before them like a black mountain, its walls covered in strange carvings. Lights glowed faintly in the windows, and alien soldiers stood at the gates. Daniel crouched behind a broken wall, studying the guards. "Too many for a quiet approach," he whispered. Mara gave him a sharp look. "So we stopped being quiet." Daniel grinned. "Exactly." The attack began with fire and fury. Explosives tore through the gates, and the rebels stormed forward. Blaster fire lit the dark courtyard as soldiers fell on both sides. "Forward!" Daniel shouted. They fought through the outer hall, then the inner chamber, step by bloody step. At last, they reached the great doors of the throne room. Daniel raised his hand. The team stopped, catching their breath. "This is it," he said, his voice low but steady. "Stay sharp. No mistakes." Mara touched his arm briefly before they kicked the doors open. Inside, the room was quiet. Too quiet. The alien leader stood at the far end, tall, cloaked in deep red, his eyes cold and bright. His guards formed a wall around him, unmoving. "So," the alien said, his voice smooth and mocking, "the great human rebel comes at last." Daniel stepped forward. "Your empire is finished. The alien chuckled darkly. You think taking one city means you've won? Fool, my fleets will burn you all to ash before the week ends. Daniel shook his head. No, your fleets are scattered. Your soldiers are broken. Your people are rising against you. It's over. The alien's grin faded. We shall see. He raised his hand, and his guards charged. The fight was brutal. The guards were faster and stronger than ordinary soldiers, but the rebels were desperate and determined. Mara fired at one, dropping him in a flash of light. Daniel dodged a blade and slammed his rifle butt into another's head. The room became a storm of violence, shouts, gunfire, the hiss of alien weapons. One by one, the guards fell until only the leader remained. Daniel stood before him, breathing hard, his rifle aimed. The alien glared at him, still defiant. Go ahead, he spat. Kill me. It won't change anything. Daniel lowered his weapon slightly. You're wrong. This ends you. It ends fear. The alien lunged suddenly, a hidden blade flashing in his hand. But Mara fired before he reached Daniel. The shot struck him in the chest, and he collapsed. With a final snarl, silence fell over the room. Outside, the news spread quickly. The alien leader was dead. Rebels poured into the streets, cheering, waving flags, hugging strangers. Civilians wept and shouted in joy. Ships in the sky retreated, their commanders unwilling to fight without orders. In the throne room, Daniel stood over the alien's body. He let out a long breath, as though the weight of years had finally lifted. Mara came to his side, resting her hand on his shoulder. It's over, she said softly. Daniel shook his head. No, it's just different now. We rebuild. We lead. We make sure this never happens again. She smiled faintly. And you think you can do all that? Daniel gave a small smile in return. I know we can. Later that night, Daniel stood alone on the balcony of the palace. The city glowed below. Him, alive with celebration. The air was full of music and laughter. A young boy approached him quietly, holding the rebellion's flag. Sir? The boy asked shyly. Daniel looked down at him. Yes? Does this mean we're free now? Daniel crouched so he was eye level with the boy. He took the flag and studied it for a moment before handing it back. Yes, he said. Gently. We're free, but we also have to stay brave. Freedom doesn't keep itself. We fight for it every day. The boy smiled and ran off into the crowd, waving his flag high. Mara joined Daniel again, leaning on the railing beside him. You did it, she murmured. He shook his head. We did it. All of us. The two stood in silence for a while, watching the people below. Fires of celebration lit up the night sky, and rebel ships soared overhead, painting trails of light across the stars. Finally, Mara said, So what now, Commander? Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired, but shining with quiet resolve. Now, he said, we build a world worth fighting for. And together, they watched as the dawn rose over the city, the first dawn of a new era. The city still smelled of smoke and victory. Banners of the rebellion waved from every rooftop. People cheered in the streets while rebel fighters repaired ships and cleared rubble. But Daniel's eyes were already on the stars. He stood at the command balcony of the old palace, watching the sky. Above, alien ships still floated, not attacking anymore, but not fleeing either. Mara walked up beside him, carrying a tablet. They're waiting, she said. Daniel didn't look at her. For what? For orders. From someone who's never coming back, she replied. Daniel's mouth tightened. Then we give them something to remember. Hours later, Daniel called his leaders into the war room. A map of the galaxy glowed in the air above the table. Red dots showed planets, still under alien control. Green lights marked worlds where rebellions had begun. The green lights were growing. Mara studied the map. We've got uprisings here, and here, she said, pointing. But they're scattered. Without help, they'll fall. Daniel nodded. Then we don't stop here. We send teams to every world that resists. We turn sparks into fire. One of the younger commanders spoke up nervously. What if the alien fleet regroups? What if they strike back? Daniel's voice was calm but hard. Let them try. We fight on every street, every planet, until they have nothing left. The room fell silent, and then one by one, the others nodded. By nightfall, the first ships launched from the capital. Rebel fighters soared into the sky, carrying weapons, supplies, and hope to other worlds. Daniel stood at the landing platform. Watching them go. Mara joined him, her arms crossed. You're sending everyone. What about you? He glanced at her. We can't ask others to fight if we don't fight too. She smirked faintly. Good. I'd hate to think you planned to sit here and watch. Their ship left at dawn. Below them, the city shrank into the distance, glowing with fires of celebration. Above them, the stars stretched on forever, full of danger and promise. The first stop was a mining planet, covered in dust and mountains. The people there had been slaves for generations, working in the alien mines. When Daniel's team landed, they found the rebels hiding in caves, thin and weak but full of quiet anger. We heard what you did in the capital, said a miner, his hands still calloused and bloody from work. Daniel nodded. We're here to help you finish it. That night, they struck the mines. Daniel led the charge, with Mara at his side. Explosions lit up the tunnels as the miners rose up, shouting and fighting with stolen weapons. By morning, the mines were theirs. The aliens fled into the hills, leaving behind their machines and weapons. Daniel stood at the top of a ridge, looking down at the freed workers. He raised his voice so all could hear. This is just the beginning, he shouted. Today, this planet is free. Tomorrow, another and another, until none of us are slaves anymore. The crowd roared in response. From there, the team moved on to a frozen world where the rebellion was close to being crushed. They landed in the middle of a snowstorm, slipping through blizzards to reach the rebel hideout. The fighters there were few and wounded. Hiding in an old factory. You came, one of them whispered in disbelief when he saw Daniel. Daniel clasped his shoulder. We all come. You're not alone anymore. Together, they ambushed the alien garrison at dawn. The battle raged through the icy streets, but by midday, the alien commander surrendered, throwing down his weapon in front of Daniel. Planet by planet, the rebellion spread like wildfire. Farmers rose up on green worlds. Factory workers rebelled on gray ones. Even some alien species who had been slaves themselves joined the fight, turning against their masters. On each planet, Daniel and Mara fought alongside the people, teaching them to stand, showing them it was possible to win. But the enemy was not finished yet. On their way to another world, their ship was ambushed by a squad of alien cruisers. Explosions rocked the hull as alarms blared. Mara strapped herself into the pilot's seat, shouting over the noise. They've been waiting for us. Daniel grabbed the blaster. Get us close to the surface. We'll lose them in the atmosphere. The ship dived sharply, dodging enemy fire. Smoke filled the cabin, and panels sparked as they broke through the clouds. Below, a desert stretched out endlessly. Mara managed to land the ship hard but alive, skidding across the sand. As they staggered out, Daniel looked up to see alien dropships descending from the sky. They're coming for us, Mara said grimly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we hold them here. We give the others time to strike elsewhere. They set up defenses quickly, using the wreckage of their ship and whatever weapons they could carry. Soon, the enemy arrived, dozens of soldiers, armed and ready. The fight was brutal. Daniel and Mara fought back to back, blasting anything that moved. Rebel reinforcements began to arrive from nearby villages, drawn by the smoke and noise. By nightfall, the desert was littered with the wreckage of alien ships. The last of the enemy fled into the dark. Daniel sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. Mara sat beside him, wiping blood from her cheek. "You really can't die, can you?" she teased weakly. He gave a faint smile. "Not yet, too much left to do." Days later, they returned to the capital. The throne room was full of leaders from every liberated world. The map of the galaxy was now covered in green lights. The red shrinking fast. Daniel stood at the center of the room as the leaders quieted down. "The enemy is broken," he said clearly, "but not gone. We will chase them to the edge of the stars if we have to. And when we finish this, we don't just build a new world, we build a better one. One where no one lives in fear again." The room erupted in cheers. Mara leaned close and whispered with a grin, "You're starting to sound like a hero." Daniel glanced at her, smiling faintly. "No, just a man who refuses to lose." That night, he stood alone on the balcony again. Below, the people celebrated, but above, the stars still held battles yet to come. He closed his eyes and let the wind carry the sound of laughter and freedom. Up to him, for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope. Behind him, Mara's voice broke the silence. "You coming back inside?" she asked gently. Daniel opened his eyes and looked at the stars. "Soon," he said. "But for now, let me watch. Let me see what we've started." Mara came and stood next to him, and together they looked out over the city, and beyond it, to a galaxy ready to rise.